we knew they would have a lack of resources. But you go on these job sites and they have just no safety equipment. So when we went back on the second trip, one of our missions was to take back as much safety equipment as we could. And there was a man in his yard working with a saw. And my husband leaned over to him and asked him, would you like these safety glasses? He stopped everything he was doing and told us that this was his home and asked if we would come inside and meet his family. And they brought their daughter down. And their daughter was a semi-famous violinist and a pianist, and she could sing and dance, and we watched videos of her performances, and she had written a song for the Pope when he came to town, and they were so proud. They were so proud of their daughter. The experience of going into someone's private home and being entertained and trying to work through the language barrier, we wouldn't have had that experience if we weren't out there taking photographs and trying to help people who needed some safety equipment along the way. There's something special about Cuba in that it has a really deep history. It has 5 centuries worth of architecture, so lots to see. But at the same time, I think Cuba's intriguing. And I do love going to other places in the world, but I think it's a mystery to most Americans because of the restrictions. So it was an intriguing opportunity that I didn't think I could pass up. I've always loved design, and this has just always let me feed my soul. I think I've evolved many times throughout my life. You go into one career and you think this is it, but it just kind of keeps moving and changing. Early in my career, I was focused on historic interiors and preservation. And so it's interesting to see this new phase of my life. And I really do think the creative research and focusing on a cultural society like Cuba is a new phase in my life. Being from a small town in Mississippi, I don't think people knew what interior design was. I think people thought it was like decorating or fluffing pillows or paint or something like that. And so I was actually discouraged to not go into that field. Someone once told me I would never get a job in the state of Mississippi in that field. And that being said, though, it always came natural to me. I love the classes. I love the creativity. And it was actually probably very different than I thought. It's a lot more structural and architectural based, and those are the areas that I really loved. I loved drawing floor plans up, and it's interesting. I've always done traditional research. I've journal articles and conference presentations and, all the things expected, but there was something really passionate about this particular project. So I've always done things like photography and painting and creative endeavors, but they've always been kind of like what I did on the side, more like a hobby versus something that would actually be a part of my research. This residency program going to Havana was the first time that really led to me thinking through how I could marry the two, actually do something that I love and I'm passionate about, but actually have a research output in the process. You have to really learn how to treat photography as a research tool and not as, I'm just taking pictures. The Cuban people and their entire society is extremely resilient. They're dealing with a situation where they have very little resources, very little materials, definitely not money, and yet they get creative. They learn to recycle. A building collapses, they scrap it of all its materials, they put it into a new building. That's 100% reflected in the architecture, but it's actually reflected in their everyday life. It's a little bit of a shock the first time you see people living in structures that would be condemned and knocked down in the United States. But it says a lot about their spirit and their ability to continue on and push through. We go there and we look at, we kind of romanticize what we see, these beautiful old buildings, even though they're in decay. Every time you mention Cuba, people bring up the 1950s cars and stuff. And the truth of the matter is, if the Cubans had their choice, they wouldn't be living with all this old stuff. They would be just like you and I and have new houses and new cars, and they're forced to make do with what they have. And so I think it just says a lot about who they are that they're able to do that. I love traveling and I love experiencing something that I've never experienced. But I think what Cuba has that so many other places doesn't is that rare feeling of being a part of something that that is special and that so many Americans don't get the opportunity to do. So the whole time you're there, you feel like you're in a moment. You have to capture the moment, and you have to be able to figure out a way to bring that experience back and share it in some small way. I think travel changes your life. You may not even realize how much international travel will change your life, but it opens your mind. You realize that the world is a much smaller place than you think. And I think inevitably it opens the door to you realizing that you can do anything and go anywhere. You can still be close to your family. You know, it's not, it just totally opens your world. I think anytime you get a better feel for other people, and maybe people that don't have the opportunities that you have, I think it makes you a better person, and I would like to think that being a better person makes me a better teacher.